Believing she was protecting his assets, she refused to transfer the money. With no prospect of a payoff, Mikkel strangled Muscatel to death with his bare hands, a crime that went totally unnoticed. 2 months after the failed kidnapping of Muscatel, Mikkel goes after Alex Umansky, and he's determined that this time he'll get it right. All Alex's family can do is sit and wait for instructions from the kidnappers.
We're basically locked in a room with the cell phone on the table, with a microphone taped to it, ready to go.
Это очень серьезно, Миша. Если не будет ровно 234.
First couple of days, the phone calls were coming often because the instructions from the kidnappers were they wanted it to happen immediately. They want the money wired right away.
Generally, the advice with respect to the ransom was to try to generate phone calls and to try to drag things out as long as they could to give them more time to hopefully try to find Alex Umansky. During some of the calls, Alex is showing concern for not only his brother's welfare, his father's welfare, his mother's welfare, his fiance's welfare, and I think that is really just a reflection of the kind of person that he was. I can't imagine, I don't think many people can imagine how frightened he must have been under those circumstances.
The kidnappers were trying to convince us through him that everything would work out, that all we had to do is pay the money and they would release him.
Because the kidnappers are forcing Alex to do all the talking, the family has no way of appealing to them directly. So they leave messages on Alex's cell phone, hoping his captors will pick them up.
Hi, you reached Alex with Hardwired Auto Accessories. Please leave your name and number. We'll call you back as soon as possible. Thank you.
Some of the messages left were heartbreaking, and a good example of that is his father offering to trade places with him.
I want to hear your voice. Саша, что делать? Может быть, они согласятся поменять нас. Ты быстрее деньги достань.
His fiancée calling and just sobbing, pleading with the kidnappers to let him go.
Мы сделаем все, что угодно, пожалуйста, будьте людьми. Мы идем по уступке, находим деньги, которых нет.
If Mikkel had wanted a quick, clean kidnapping, it was clear he'd gotten in way over his head. Now, the feds were still scrambling, but once again, his lack of planning would put him behind the 8 ball.
Next Friday night on True TV, crack the code with Case File Friday.
Alex Umansky's ransom deadline is approaching fast, and his kidnapper, Yuri Mikkel, is still flying under the FBI's radar.
A guy like Yuri Mikkel could come to Los Angeles and pretty much blend in anywhere. He could find out who were the easiest targets. Put a guy like that in Omaha, and it might be a different story.
Yuri Mikkel was born in the former Soviet Union, and he grew up in St. Petersburg, which is perhaps one of the more westernized portions of the former Soviet Union. He got in trouble when he was about 18 years old and sent to a Russian prison for a period of time. It appears that it's there where he learned his craft, and that this Russian prison was a breeding ground for him to learn how to do the things that he subsequently did in the United States. And when he emerged from the former Soviet Union, he emerged as a sophisticated and really lethal individual.
Like the rest of his countrymen who fled west, Mikkel saw LA as the mecca of material wealth.
This is a man, Mr. Mikkel, who went from living in the former Soviet Union in a one-bedroom flat with his mother and brother to living in a Tudor mansion at the top of a hill overlooking the valley that had more rooms than you could count and more bathrooms than you could ever need. He definitely had a taste for the finer things. When you would look at all the stuff that he had around his house, all the records that he kept, photographs of him traveling throughout the world, pictures of him standing next to various fine cars, including multiple Ferraris that he owned at different points in time. This is a guy who wanted to live high on the hog.
After a few years in L.A., Mikkel began searching for a crew to back him up in his crime spree. His first recruit was a Lithuanian laborer named Georgijus Kadamovis.
Mr. Kadamovis apparently always dreamed of opening an aquarium shop and had plans to build such a place, but couldn't find the financing to support that. And Mr. Mikkel apparently came to him and offered to help build that shop.
Aquariums are pretty to look at and all, but Mikkel has bigger fish in mind.
They also got together and formed another type of business, which is the business of kidnapping and killing people.
Mikkel and Kadamovis knew they needed more muscle to put their plan into action, so they turned to a Ukrainian technician named Peter Krylov and a muscle-bound Latvian goon named Einar Altmanis.
Well, this was a uniquely vicious group of people who got together. They were sort of like sharks who were always out there prowling around for their next victim. And their victims, the victims they eyed, were victims who had money. And that money was the blood that the shark smelled. And as soon as they smelt that, they were on that victim.
And how did they single out Alex Umansky? Seems Peter Krylov led Mikkel right to the target.
He worked for my brother for a long time, so I got a good sense of who Peter was, and I told my brother I don't like him at all, that I don't know why he's employing him. I told my brother right away that he cannot hold this guy for too long. It's just bad news.
And while the feds are hunting for the kidnappers are trying to figure out exactly how much their victim is worth.
They took all of his information, his credit cards out of his wallet, every scrap of paper he had on him. They looked through his phone, people who could pay money for his release, and they did so in order to size up how much money they could get from the guy.
Mikkel even uses Alex's ATM card to check on his bank balance. Turns out, Umansky wasn't the multimillionaire they thought he was.
Alex Umansky had a little stucco house in the valley, and he wasn't a person of means at all. It was his clients who had a few ducats to their name. The fancy SUVs, the Land Rovers, and the BMWs. No, he was regular folks.
Mikkel may have been a successful crook back home, but when it came to planning crimes in America, something seems to have gotten lost in translation. Picking targets with a lot of accessible cash is kidnapping 101.
The day before the ransom was due, Mr. Umansky was reporting back to his family that the kidnappers were going to cut off his fingers if the money wasn't paid properly, and this was not a joking matter. And you can hear the fear in Mr. Umansky's voice.
The deadline for the ransom approaches, and as instructed, the family wires the money into a predetermined account. But at the FBI's suggestion, they only pay $89,000 of the $234,000 ransom demand. When the feds follow the money trail, they're amazed at what they discover.
We knew that the money originally went to Dubai, then parts of it went to Latvia. We had money that then circulated back into the United States. We had money that went to Jamaica. We had money that went to Barbados, all in different accounts, all in different names.
The money is circling the globe with the FBI in hot pursuit, but Alex Umansky is still handcuffed to a chair in Los Angeles. Agents in LA question everyone in Umansky's inner circle, including Alex's ex-employee, Peter Krylov, one of Mikkel's henchmen.
He basically turned the FBI away from Alexander Umansky when he could have actually led law enforcement directly to his whereabouts.
Now, 4 days after the kidnapping, Krylov calls Mikkel and lets him know that the heat is on. After that, the phone calls from Alex stop.
We didn't get any more phone calls from the son. Now everybody starts getting concerned. Is he alive?
With the feds clearly moving in the right direction, Mikkel could have taken the money and run. But he was a gambling man, and instead of folding his hand, he decided to double down.
There's no better sun protection than Banana Boat. are able.
Alex's family wires the balance of the ransom, and investigators fly to Dubai to try to follow the money trail. Meanwhile, Mikkel is busy thinking about someone else's bank account, that of prosperous Russian businessman turned movie producer George Safiev.
George Safiev was a relatively recent immigrant from Russia. He had been a successful banker in Russia, a successful businessman. He had come to the United States sort of to live the American dream.
Safiev has big money, the kind of loot that allows him to live in a huge gated estate designed to keep bad guys like Mikkel out. But Mikkel has a plan. He sends his partner in crime, Kadamovas, to set up a meeting with Safiev's accountant, Rita Peckler, on the pretext of seeking financial advice.
Ms. Peckler wasn't abducted in order to get ransom money from her family or her business associates. She was abducted